Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakia. Thank you for joining me for meditation and sutra study. This evening's practice will consist of a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from the Brahmasnet Sutra, followed by a Dharma talk. The title of today's Dharma talk is Morality in Buddhist Practice. Before we get into that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. So we'll begin, as we always do on Wednesdays, with our guided meditation. I'll give you a moment to get into position. The only rule is that you need to be in a comfortable position that you can hold for at least 15 minutes without moving. If you want to lie down, that's fine, but please don't fall asleep. If you'd like some instruction, what I like to do is sit, legs crossed, back straight, chin slightly tucked. Left hand goes in the lap, palm up. Right hand goes over the left. Eyes can be closed, but if you prefer to keep them open, that's fine. Just point them down towards the floor at a 45-degree angle. That way we eliminate visual distractions. And we'll begin this evening very simply by breathing in and out through the nose. Breathing in this way tells our body that we're safe, we can relax. Slowly we begin to feel a sense of calm come over us. And as we continue breathing in and out through the nose, on every inhale we poke out our belly button, giving ourselves a good lung full of air. And we relax on the exhale. Finally, if we're wondering what to do with our minds, we bring our focus and our concentration to the physical sensations of the breath. The feeling of air moving up and down our throat. The feeling of our stomach expanding and contracting with every breath. The feeling of our clothing against our skin. And as we continue breathing in and out through our nose, giving ourselves permission to do nothing for a little while, the feeling of calm continues. We'll do this for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. No need to worry about that. And if our mind wanders, we simply say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to our breathing and to the physical sensations of the breath. Wonderful. Now, as we continue with our breathing, we add a visualization to the exercise. We visualize a fire burning in our belly and the space behind our belly button. This fire represents our spiritual power, and it's our favorite color. If we like purple, the fire is purple. If we like yellow, the fire is yellow. And we take a moment to just watch the flames crackle and pop. Now, with every inhale, we breathe in through the nose, visualizing air coming into our lungs. With every exhale, we breathe out through the nose and we blow on the fire in our belly, making it bigger and brighter with every breath, feeding it more and more oxygen every time air exits our lungs. We'll do this for about a minute. I'll keep time. Wonderful. Everyone's sitting so quietly and so still. It's a terrific energy this evening. And now we'll build on that energy by visualizing a channel of energy going down from our belly, down, down, down to the center of the earth until we find an energy that's identical to our own. If our own energy is green, the earth's energy is green. If our energy is red, the earth's energy is red. And slowly we begin pulling that energy from the earth into ourselves. With every inhale, we bring energy up, storing it in our belly, and with every exhale, we blow on that energy just like we were before, amplifying it, adding the earth's energy to our own. We breathe in, energy comes from the earth. We breathe out, that energy gets bigger and brighter with every breath. We'll do this for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. And if our mind wanders, that's okay. We just say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to the breathing and to the visualization. Great work. And as we continue sitting, we send a second energy channel up from our belly, up, 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 past our solar plexus, past our throat, until it gets to the top of our head. And now, with every inhale, we continue bringing energy up from the earth, storing it in our belly. Every exhale, push that energy up, 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 past our solar plexus, past our throat, until it explodes out of the top of our head and rains down like a volcano, covering every inch of us in healing spiritual light. We breathe in, energy comes up from the earth and it's stored in our belly. Every exhale, that fiery energy explodes out of the top of our head and rains down like a volcano. We've had a hard week. Many joys and many challenges. And this is our chance to send some healing wherever it's needed. Covering ourselves in the energy and the light of enlightenment. We'll do this for about a minute. I'll keep time. No need to worry about that. Wonderful. Now it's time to slowly, gently bring our meditation to a close. We begin by closing off the energy channel to the top of our head. The energy barely reaches our nose, barely reaches our throat, barely reaches our chest with every inhale and exhale, until finally it rests right there in our belly. And then we slowly cut off the energy channel going down to the earth. Noticing that even though the earth has fed us today, it's not depleted. The more it gives, the more it has to give. And perhaps to give a silent bow in our minds, thanking the earth for helping us in our practice, in the same way it did the Buddha 2,600 years ago. And now we end where we started, with our breathing and with the energy burning in our belly. We take a minute to notice that this energy is always there to call upon if we need it. We don't need to wait until Wednesday meditation. But for now, it's time to come back into our bodies, so we let the visualization fade. And we move our heads to the left and to the right, back and forth. Feeling the physical sensations. And then we come back to center. We roll our shoulders forward and back, loosening ourselves up, feeling the movement of our muscles. If you're old like me, you may also feel the creak of your bones. And finally, we just let our shoulders hang down towards the ground. And now, if our eyes are closed, we open them. And I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Thank you so much for sitting with me. I like sitting by myself. I do it every day, but it's always especially nice when I get to sit with other people. So this is great. And now we'll move on to our Suture Reading. We're continuing our study of the Brahmasnet Sutra using the BDK English Tripitaka translation. Not necessary to have a copy of the text, but it's helpful if you'd like to follow along. And our reading begins on page 25, continuing our discussion of the 10 grounds. We'll be reading through 3 through 5. 3. The ground of the luminosity of the essence. My disciples, Bodhisattvas at the ground of the luminosity of the essence use samadhi in complete understanding to know all the Buddhist teachings of the 3 times, the words, meanings, and phrases of the 12 divisions of the canon, repeated verses, predictions, straight narrative, pure verse, uninvited sermons, rules and disciplines, parables, Buddha realms, ancient matters, corrective never before seen, and conversations. This is the essence of the Dharma, with words specifying all meanings. All conditioned dharmas are explained within these words, meanings, and phrases. They are born bit by bit, starting with the entry of consciousness into the womb and the 4 elements that enliven the material and mental factors, names and the 6 sense bases within the faculties, produce raw awareness, which, having not yet discriminated suffering and pleasure, is called contact consciousness. Furthermore, the consciousness of suffering, pleasure, and consciousness is called the 3 sensations. One is continually aware of and endlessly attached to sensation. Through grasping desire, self-views, and precepts, good and evil come into existence. The advent of consciousness is called birth. The end of consciousness is called death. These 10 items are the contemplation of the causes, conditions, and effects of present suffering. In this mode of appearance, of contemplation of dependent arising, by means of the middle way, I have been free for a long time and have no sense of own nature. Entering into luminous supernatural powers, total retention, and eloquence, I contemplate emptiness in all thoughts, and in the present kalpa, in the Buddha lands of the 10 directions. I teach others, enlightening others for 100 kalpas, 1,000 kalpas. In these lands, I nourished supernatural abilities, paying obeisance before the Buddha, and requesting to hear words of Dharma. I furthermore appear in bodies throughout the 6 destinies, and in a single voice explain countless aspects of the Dharma. Yet each sentient being, according to his or her particular spiritual proclivities, hears the Dharma he or she wants to hear. Suffering, emptiness, impermanence, and no self are the sounds of the one truth of suffering. Their lands are not the same, their bodies and minds are transformed in distinctive ways. What is explained here in this ground of illumination of the marvelous flower is nothing more than a summary that is like a single strand of hair. Its full elaboration is like that explained in the Dharma chapter and in the Liberation Contemplation Dharma Gate Thousand Samadhi chapter. 4. The ground of the knowability of the essence. My disciples, Bodhisattvas in the stage of essence accord with the real and illuminate the conventional without annihilating or holding to eternalism. At the same time, arising, abiding, and extinguishing each lifetime, each moment, and each existence are differentiated. Since they appear differently, the middle way of causes and conditions is neither one nor two, neither good nor bad. Since they are neither worldlings nor Buddhas, the realms of the Buddhas and the realms of the worldlings are distinguished one by one. This is called conventional truth. In this view of the way of discernment, there is neither one nor two, the profound way and the category of concentration. The mental functions of the Buddhas are, at first, the awareness of concentration as cause, then faith awareness, thought awareness, still awareness, upward awareness, remembrance awareness, wisdom awareness, contemplation awareness, pliant awareness, comfortable awareness, and indifferent awareness. These various categories of the path of skillful means enter in each thought into the concentration result. These people abiding in concentration vividly see the emptiness of the activity of dharmas. If they give rise to mindful concentration, they enter into the production of thought concentration, produce loving accordance with the way, and following the Dharma they teach people. This is called tolerance of joy in the Dharma, tolerance of abiding, tolerance of realization, and tolerance of extinction. Therefore, the Buddhas entering the radiant flower samadhi manifest innumerable Buddhas who, placing their hands on the heads of the listeners, expound the Dharma with a single voice. In 100,000 sterns, they do not depart from concentration. They abide in concentration, enjoy the flavor of concentration, are addicted to concentration, and crave concentration. Abiding in concentration in one kalpa or 1,000 kalpas, these people see Buddhas on lotus thrones expounding 100 approaches to the Dharma. These people make offerings and listen to the Dharma, abiding in concentration for a single kalpa. At this time, within the Buddha's luminosity, they receive the laying on of the Buddha's hands on their heads and give rise to the state of concentration, the aspect of transcendence, the aspect of advancement, and the aspect of tending toward. So they do not sink down and do not retreat. They do not fall and they do not linger. In the Dharma of the peak samadhi, there is tolerance of superior bliss, permanent extinction without remainder. Thereupon, entering into all Buddha lands, they cultivate themselves in the category of innumerable merits. Each practice luminously shining, entering into the application of skillful means. They enlighten all sentient beings, enabling them to gain a vision of the constancy, bliss, self, and purity of Buddha nature. These people who are born in and abide in this land carry out the Dharma teachings of conversation, which become gradually more profound. With knowledge of the contemplation of sky flowers, they enter the middle way of the essence, and the chapter on all the approaches to the Dharma is fulfilled. It is just like the adamant mentioned in the previous chapter on the course of the sun and the moon, in which this point has already been explained. 5. The ground of the wisdom illumination of the essence. My disciples, for bodhisattvas at the ground of the essence of wisdom illumination, the Dharma has qualities produced from 10 kinds of powers, which give rise to all meritorious activities. By one activity of the skillful means of wisdom, one knows the distinction of good and evil activities. This is the category of the Dharma of the power of knowing what is appropriate. Knowledge of the karma from good and evil activities is called the category of knowledge power. Knowledge of all the desires and aspirations of all beings in the 6 destinies is called the category of the power of knowledge. The fruits desired, knowledge of the distinction of the natures of beings in the 6 destinies is the category of the power of knowledge of natures. The knowledge of the distinction of faculties as being wholesome or unwholesome is the category of the power of the knowledge of the faculties. Knowledge of the wrongly determined, correctly determined, and undetermined is called the category of knowledge of determination. Knowing that in all the causes and effects in the path, the vehicle is the cause and the vehicle is the effect. And that reaching the effect is based in the vehicle that is the cause of the path. This is the category of the power of the knowledge of the path. The 5 eyes know all dharmas and see the undergoing of all rebirths. Hence, the category of the power of the knowledge of the divine eye. Every single matter of 1,000 kalpas is known. This is the category of the power of the knowledge of previous lives. Knowledge of the extinction of all active afflictions and the extinction of all received ignorance. This is the category of the power of the knowledge of liberation. The knowledge of these 10 categories of powers is to know one's own cultivation of causes and fruition, as well as to know the distinction in the causes and fruitions of all sentient beings. Yet, the distinct functions of body, speech, and mind take the Pure Land as an evil land, and take evil lands as paradise. They are able to turn the wholesome into the unwholesome, and the unwholesome into the wholesome. They take form as non-form, and non-form as form. Males are taken as female, females are taken as male. The 6 destinies are taken as being other than the 6 destinies, and that which is other than the 6 destinies is taken as the 6 destinies, and so forth up to earth, water, fire, and wind not being earth, water, fire, and wind. At this time, this person takes the power of great skillful means and goes along with all sentient beings. Yet he sees the inconceivable, that which is unknowable to those at lower stages, the awareness of all the mundane affairs of life. This person's great wisdom gradually advances, discriminating cognition illuminates again and again, immeasurably and immeasurably. Inexplicably, ineffable approaches to the Dharma are right before him. There's always a really good feeling that comes over me when I read the sutras, but especially when I read the sutras out loud for some reason. It's very similar to chanting. So this practice, it's, I hope, beneficial for you, but it's also very beneficial for me as well. So as promised, today we're going to be talking about morality and what it has to do with Buddhist practice and how we understand and manifest morality in Buddhist practice. And this is an important topic because morality is a bit of a 4-letter word in our culture. We are very much a, if it feels good, do it type of society. And that sounds good on the surface. However, things that feel good in the moment aren't necessarily good for us in the long run. And things that are good for us, per se, may not be good for the people around us. So if we have this, if it feels good, do it mentality, then we can create a lot of unnecessary harm, not only for ourselves, but for the people around us as well. I may really enjoy listening to my music, and it might feel very good, but if I have roommates and I play that music as loud as I can at 3 in the morning, well, it's not going to be good for the people around me. And it's also, frankly, probably not very good for my hearing as well. So while we certainly want people to feel good in Buddhist practice, there's more to life than that. We have to feel good within a very specific context so that that goodness doesn't result in harm. So let's start with some definitions. How do we define morality? According to Google's definition, or dictionary rather, when I looked it up, it offered this definition: principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong, or good and bad behavior. Now, this is where it gets sticky. I've heard some people say that, well, Buddhists don't believe in right and wrong, or the practice is beyond good and bad, but this is complete nonsense. The Buddha, if we look at his life, had a very strict moral code. He held himself and his monastics to very high standards of conduct. And we, as Buddhists, as image bearers of the Dharma, should hold ourselves also to very high standards of conduct. But it can be tricky. Many people have been abused because the people they look to for moral codes misuse those codes for their own benefit. And sometimes moral codes can be so strict that they take away any sense of moral agency from us. So there's a balancing act that needs to happen here. We have to have a code of conduct that's strict enough that it's beneficial to ourselves and others, that we don't see the pure as impure and the impure as pure, as we're warned about in the sutra. But we have to have enough looseness and enough play that we don't feel the need to rebel, that we still have a sense of moral agency. So how do we do that? Well, the way I find a balance is I approach morality in the same way that I approach my garden. So when I first moved here, me and my partner, when we came to this homestead, there wasn't much here. There were trees, there were grass, but for what we wanted to do in building a garden, we were starting from scratch. There was lots of land, lots of grass, soil, and that was pretty much it. And I had some knowledge of farming due to the time I spent interning on farms in Indiana and New York. But there's so many options that go into building a garden. Do you plant your plants in ground, or do you use containers for your garden? And if you use containers, do you use pots or do you use raised beds? What are the raised beds made out of? What kind of soil goes into them? What kind of plants do you want to grow? So many questions. And what was really interesting was that, unlike the times when I was an intern, where there was another higher authority telling me, do it this way, the garden in this case was all mine. So I could literally do whatever I wanted to do with it. But I had a goal in mind, and this is important. I feel that one of the reasons people struggle in their spiritual practice and in their lives in general is because they don't have goals. They don't know, what are we trying to accomplish? Now, in the grand scheme of things, I know some of the purists are biting at the bits in the comments to tell me that Buddhism is a goalless practice, and that's true to a point. But the other side of that is that there is a goal. And we'll get into the goal of Buddhism and Buddhist morality in a minute, but for my garden, the goal was very simple. I wanted to grow as much food as possible. So for all the plants that I put into my garden, I wanted them to grow, I wanted them to be fruitful, and I wanted to get as much production as possible because this is how I'm hoping to feed my household. So I had to do some research, I had to study. And as I did that, I started to develop wisdom, and rules of conduct, rules of gardening started to develop. I can grow my tomatoes however I want to grow them. There's no one here to tell me otherwise. But if I want a good harvest, they need plenty of sunlight and they need lots of water. I can do whatever I want with my collard greens. Again, no one to tell me otherwise. This is my homestead, but my research and the wisdom that developed from it taught me that if I wanted my collard greens to do well, they prefer cold weather. They don't like to be too hot. They like lots of water, and they like to be in the shade. They can do okay in direct sunlight, but they prefer shade. Now, do I follow those rules? Do I not follow those rules? Well, I make that decision based on what's going to help me achieve my goal, which is, again, to grow as much food as possible. So I chose to follow those rules, and my harvest went pretty well. We harvested just over 200 pounds of produce this year. So some of you probably think that's a lot, some of you probably think that's nothing, but I was happy with it for our first time out. So you could say that over the course of time, due to the research that I was doing in my garden, a sort of morality developed. Rules of conduct in the right and wrong ways to run my garden, to grow my plants, to manage the seeds, to water the soil, etc. And it worked out wonderfully in that I still had that sense of agency that we talked about earlier. It was me making the decisions of how I wanted to do things, but at the same time, I had clear benchmarks. I had guideposts, and I could do whatever I wanted inside of those posts, but I knew where to go and where not to go. I knew the difference between too much water and too little water. I knew how to handle the pests, the squash bugs and the cabbage worms that showed up throughout the year. And when we think of Buddhist morality and morality in our own personal lives, we should think of it as if we're dealing with a garden. We can do whatever we want. The Buddha is not standing over our shoulder telling us what to do. But if we want to achieve our goal, well, there are some rules associated with that. And the goal of Buddhism, well, there are a couple of goals. We hope to realize enlightenment, which is defined in the sutras as the manifestation of our Buddha nature, our own enlightened mind in daily life. But that's not the final goal, believe it or not. We want to attain Nirvana, which is defined in the sutras as the extinguishment of the flame being our defilements, greed, anger, and ignorance. It could also be thought of as inner peace. We want to attain inner peace. And that's a goal of Buddhism, but that's not the final goal. The ultimate goal of Mahayana Buddhism is to end suffering for ourselves and for other people. All of the Buddhist practices we see in the sutras, the chanting, the meditation, the sutra study, the precepts, the metta meditation, the walking meditation, it's all designed with that in mind. How can we end suffering for ourselves and for other people? So using that as a goal, that's our guidepost. That's our measuring stick to decide, is this right or wrong? Should I do this or should I not? We simply ask ourselves, does this cause suffering for myself? Does this cause suffering for other people? If it does cause suffering, we ask ourselves the next question. Is there another way to do this that avoids that suffering? Sometimes there will be, sometimes there won't be. If there is, then we do that other thing. If there's not, well, we ask ourselves a third question. How can I work with this thing skillfully so that I minimize the suffering caused to myself and to others? Okay, so there's 3 parts to this. Does this cause suffering? If yes, is there another way that I can do it? If there's not another way, well, how can I minimize the suffering in this action so that I make life, if not great, at least not worse for myself and other people? And this is a type of thinking that can be applied to any part of our lives. And this should contribute to the way we look at the moral teachings in the sutras. Because like I said, if we feel like we're being controlled too much, we feel the need to rebel. You can't make me do this. No one's trying to make us do anything. What we find in the moral precepts of the sutras, the 5 lay precepts, for example, to refrain from killing, stealing, lying, the abuse of intoxicants, and the abuse of poisons, the abuse of sexuality. This is not us trying to be controlled. This is the result of the wisdom and the research that was done by the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas that came before us in the gardens of their own lives. They did the experiments. What happens if I speak to people kindly? What happens if I speak to them harshly? What happens if I take things that don't belong to me? What happens if I'm charitable? And based on that research, they've determined that this is the best way to live our lives in a moral way. This is the primary focus of our ethical conduct as Buddhists, so that we remove suffering wherever possible. But what's really great about the moral codes of Buddhism is that we don't have to take them at face value. They are guideposts, but we can also experiment ourselves in our own lives. If we're really stuck on this lying thing and we want to see if it'll work for us, we can try it. Nothing wrong with that. If we really think that in this moment I need to say some dirty words to this person, raise my voice and tell them how I feel, okay. You're still welcome to come back here every Wednesday and meditate. You won't get kicked out of the Sangha. But I encourage you to really look at the karma, look at the results of that action and see what happens. What happens to us, the reason morality is so tricky is because we get so caught up in what feels good. We get so caught up in the mind of desire that we literally cannot see what's happening. We have no idea. We did something happened, and that connection that it was my actions that resulted in this isn't there. In the Nirvana Sutra, the Buddha describes this as someone who's so drunk that they don't even recognize their own mother or their own sister. That's us. We are drunk on our desires, that unquenchable thirst for more. And that's what makes morality difficult. That's why when we hear things like, be compassionate, be charitable, be kind, we intellectually know that makes sense, but there's still that part of it that's like, I don't know if I can be kind all the time. Maybe most of the time, but there's this one person in my life where I just really have to tell them how I feel. That's not us speaking. That's not our true self, our Buddha self speaking. That's our defilements, which everyone has, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. Greed, anger, ignorance. The Buddha dealt with it 2,600 years ago, and we deal with it now. So if we know that morality is necessary, and we know that we can experiment in our own lives to figure out what our own moral code will be, though if we aren't sure what to do, we can always look to the sutras for guidance. Well, how do we go about that experimentation? Well, there are two things. One we already talked about. We read the sutras. This is the study that was described during the reading. Because what we find in the sutras is models of behavior. We can learn ethical conduct by seeing what did the Buddha do? What did Vimalakirti do? What did Kannan do in this situation? And we can follow their example. Just like if we have a coach or a parent or someone else that we admire, we might follow in their footsteps and follow their example, right? The other is through meditative practice. This is the samadhi that was brought into play. This is how we break through that mind of desire that makes morality so difficult, that makes us fight and pull back from ethical conduct. By concentrating and focusing on our life, by paying attention and being mindful, we're able to see the karma of our actions. In the same way that when I was in my garden and paying attention, I was able to see, oh, well, this crop of potatoes is doing very well. This crop of potatoes isn't doing so well. So what's the difference? Oh, well, I watered these more than I watered these, so I need to water my potatoes more. Only we do that in our daily life. So that's where Buddhist morality comes from. 1, reading of the sutras, where we find good examples to follow. 2, through concentration and meditation. This is why we do seated meditation. This is why we chant, which is another form of meditation, because it trains our mind to be present in this moment. And as we're present in this moment, we're able to act in a moral way. And there's one other thing that also helps us with our morality in Buddhism, and that's the traditional Buddhist practices, the meditation, the chanting, the bowing, the sutra study, etc. We don't just do it because we're trying to look cool. We are acting out morality with each action. When we practice seated meditation, we're practicing samadhi so that we can carry it into our daily life. And like I said earlier, see the consequences of our actions. When we chant the sutras, we are studying the actions of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, bringing them into our minds over and over again so that we can follow their example. When we bow and give offerings in front of the altar, we are practicing generosity, practicing kindness. So that becomes a part of us. It becomes natural. And then we naturally practice kindness and generosity in daily life. Giving an offering at our altar, giving money to a homeless person, same thing. Preparing food for a monk or a nun, preparing food for a loved one, same thing. So if we're trying to determine what's moral in life, we just need to do those 3 things: the traditional Buddhist practices, the reading of the sutras, and meditation. And finally, we have to have trust, not just in the Buddha, but also in ourselves. You are a Buddha. Under all of those defilements that all of us have, you also have a Buddha nature, an enlightened mind that tells you right from wrong. In the West, we call this thing our conscience. And if everything else isn't working, if everything else fails, we can listen to our conscience. And as the fairy tale says, let that be our guide. Amitabha. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. I'll just end with a few announcements. This was Meditation and Sutra Study. It happens every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. We also do Dharma Sunday. That happens every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. That's a little less involved. That's just a Dharma talk that's centered around something that's happening in politics or popular culture. My focus there, like now, is to tie canonical Buddhist teachings with daily life. If you enjoyed this talk, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you hit the like button, that'd be great as well. So until next time, Amitabha.